Well, hello, everybody, and it's another edition of Recruiters with No Limits. Unscripted all the time, top edgy staffing stuff all the time. I got here with my co-host, John Raffini. What's up, brother?
How are you, sir?
Good, and we got a great guest today. I'm just going to introduce him right now. Joel, man, he's the LinkedIn guru, so I don't even know his last name. It's just Joel, man. He knows everybody. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. I was loving that intro. I'm a bass player, so I'd love the slapping and
high energy all the time, man.
It is, man. I love it.
We're going to jump right into something that's going on. I'm going to surprise John with this, but this last week, this has been one of the biggest topics for one of the companies. It's Walmart. I don't know if you guys heard this or not, but they are giving tuition now.
Did not hear that. 100%.
100% to certain universities right now if you are an employee of Walmart and Sam's Club. I mean,
that'll get you to apply.
This is what's going on now in our world is like, they're giving anything out to get workers to stay. What do you think, Joel?
I think it's about time, although I do think that education's overpriced. So I think they should lower the price of education on the whole. But yeah, I mean, I think you just see it. I mean, if you drive down the street, I'm seeing sign-on bonuses to McDonald's. Everybody's got a sign on there that says apply, come hire, we're paying. I'm seeing salaries advertised, $18, $20, $22 an hour for jobs that a couple of years ago were $13, $14 an hour. So it's competitive. I mean, whatever you can do to get an edge, you got to do it. And but I wonder how many people are incentivized by things like that. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
Well, next year. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead, buddy.
I'll say you're right. That'll capture a part of the workforce, but it's not going to be universally applicable. So then it's like, all right, well, what else can we do? So got to be creative, try and get that talent.
Well, what'll be creative? Like you're at the carnival, they're going to be standing outside grabbing you when you're stopping you with your car and saying, "Hey, come on, apply for me." You know what I mean? It's going to be like, giving you prizes and stuff. Who knows what's going to happen? But yeah, I've never seen more now hiring signs. Like it's tattooed in my brain for life. It's like everywhere you go.
There's got to be some sort of kind of training that covers all sorts of retail jobs, and maybe you have like a restaurant training or like a retail store training, and just start training people, and you could probably just break in the cash as a staffing agency just for retail, because I just think it's so hard, and then you get people through the door. I mean, I just one of my friends, she just got an entry level job. She's right out of college. She just got a job at a factory just to get her way in, and they said that if you show up for a month, if you just show up, you're probably better than 90% of the people that they bring in.
Wow.
So that's the requirement now, it's just show up.
Just show up.
Heartbeat of body is what it's about. We used to joke about that, but now it's seriously, you show up, and now they're having it where they pay you every day sometimes. It's like they're going back to that stuff.
Crazy.
It's pretty insane.
It is.
But I definitely
use the word unprecedented, but it's kind of unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it.
No, and you know what? We keep saying every week it's going to get better, but it's like a circus. Something else happens every week. What's going to happen next week? They're going to have school buses pick people up and drop them off.
Well, now, hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room now. With the spike of the Delta variant with COVID, all of a sudden you're saying, did you see what they did in New York City starting in September? Yeah. You can't go into any indoor, whether it's a restaurant, a gym, a concert hall. If you're not showing proof of vaccination, you can't go in. I mean, so what's that? Microsoft just said they're requiring workers now at the office to be fully vaccinated. Now all of a sudden you've got that's going to really throw a wrench into the workforce.
Yeah. I mean, what is it like to go back to the office and you got to show proof? Most people don't even want to go back to the office. Mm-hmm. And and then you still got the Great Resignation just flying over everybody, and that news about just people wanting to leave their jobs. And I think the more you talk about it, the more it just becomes a reality, and more people think, why am I working at this company? Is there something else I could be doing? It's like a mix of just everything after how crazy 2020 was as well. It's wild. Right
I'd love to
before
see
school
it.
starts too. That's like the worst
Oh, I
time,
know,
you know?
right? Yeah.
Well, let's just, like I always say, and John knows this, just ride the wave like a surfboard, right? Just keep riding the wave, man. See what happens, right?
I love
Well,
it.
hey, Joe,
It'll
real
be
quick,
interesting to see
man.
how many entrepreneurs get, how many people went out on their own over the last 18 months. I'm sure it's a huge number. And to all of our points, it's like, it makes people evaluate, do I want to go back to the office? Do I want to go back to this company? Do I want to, work for someone else? So a lot of people started side hustles, which are blossoming into actual businesses. That's like the down it. There's always a positive when a negative happens. So the negative was COVID, but the positive are all these opportunities that people found for themselves that they may not have otherwise even invested the time to do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people had probably more savings saved
Mhm.
up. Obviously, if you're out of a job, that might be a little different of a situation. But if you're not able to go out and eat as much, you're not able to do as many things, you're not able to vacation, suddenly you've got a savings that maybe you've never had before. And then starting a side hustle, as soon as you start to see some income generated,
Oh, yeah.
you're starting to think, okay, I can replace my full-time income, or maybe I could take a hit. And maybe I'm in a house where two people are working, and then the other person could support me, and I can follow
Totally.
my passion. And I think it's more, especially now with the amount of online usage going up. Like obviously platforms like LinkedIn have seen more usage, but other platforms like TikTok and Instagram, they've just seen such a skyrocketing engagement that there's a lot you can do if you know what you're doing on one of those platforms that make businesses like if t-shirt companies, or maybe you've got a bakery. There's a lot of companies that you can get so much exposure on TikTok or on Instagram, drive crazy sales, and as soon as you start figuring out how to do that, opens up a lot of opportunities for people. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe hadn't thought about that because they were so engrossed in their day to day. The last 18 months, I think, has just made people think about their priorities and what matters to them and what options they have, which maybe they hadn't thought about 18 months ago.
Great point.
So true. So now that's why you're here, Joel. LinkedIn. Winning with LinkedIn. I mean, this is something that's we got to talk about over and over again. So, Joel, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick in a recap, and then we'll deep dive into what you do every single day, 24/7, man.
Yeah. Hopefully not 24/7, but it can feel like that, right?
Because seems like it, man. You're posting everywhere.
Yeah, post a lot. So my background started in the recruitment world in 2015. Before that, I was in the banking industry, managing a bank and doing loans for small businesses and mortgages as well. I was based out in Southern California, so a lot of my job was regulations, making sure everything was running smoothly. My only experience really with recruiting was hiring tellers and bankers within the banking space. So I had to do some interviews and obviously things like that. But one of my friends started a recruitment company. They had a fresh approach to recruitment in terms of how they build. And he sold me on it. It was like, you should come work for the company. The only, I guess, negative was you got to move back to Wisconsin because we want you to feel like the culture of the company, even though we're all remote. And I said, yeah, you know what? I've got family back there, and it just made sense at that time. So I moved back to Wisconsin, started in the recruitment space, started as a generalist. My first role that I filled was it was a drafter position for an exhibits company. So it was an exhibits company. They do trade shows, and they needed a drafter that could put together these exhibits, and got the placement in like 6 weeks. It was super cool. It was again, their model was different. So they have specific people that did business development, and then they had recruitment consultants, and then you had account managers. So everybody worked together. So I was able to just hop on and start recruiting right away. And I fell in love with the industry because it was way different than banking, which is so regulated. And obviously there's regulations in HR, but when it comes to recruitment, what I found was getting people's attention, selling them on the culture, selling them on the role, figuring out what their goals and aspirations are. So it's a much more sales-based role. And if you want to be successful, I believe you've got to be creative, and you've got to think about, how am I going to separate myself from the other people that are looking to hire this candidate. How am I going to get some time with them? So I spent 5 years at that company and started off as a generalist, and I switched into our construction division, and I started focusing on higher level construction roles. So, project management, superintendents, project executives, moving up into the C-suite as well, placed a couple of executive positions. And at the end of 2019, I started seeing, I'd seen on LinkedIn for a while that video had really started making, an impact on the platform. And I just started following people locally to me. There was a lot of people in Milwaukee at the time that were creating LinkedIn content. And they just kept on saying like, oh, if you create content, you can drive more leads to your business, and you can do this, you can do that, you can grow your business if you create content. And I just looked at the content out there, and I was like, you know what, I think I could do this myself. I think I could write some stories and all this sort of stuff. So I started doing it towards the end of 2019, and started to see, number one, I started to gain engagement. I started to get a lot of inbound connections. And, granted, I started with zero experience with even how to write. I didn't really understand what content was, had zero training. But after about 6 months, I started to actually get business leads, started to get candidate leads, started to realize like, well, this actually works. And I figured out what works, what doesn't. And it got to the point where I also realized that this is what I'm actually passionate about. And I'm passionate about social media. I'm passionate about changing the brand awareness in our industry. I think that there's a lot of great recruiters that kind of fly under the radar. And I think there's a lot of not great recruiters that fly under the radar as well. And so I left the recruitment world and transitioned over to marketing. It would have been last September, so coming up to a year ago. At first, started my own company, started helping out agency owners with their content. I was ghostwriting essentially for them, so writing their actual LinkedIn content. And then I realized that I don't think they really actually need help with writing. Like, I think most recruiters can write, but it was the coming up with the ideas, and it was the articulating the knowledge that they had. That was the struggle, and like coming up with ideas of what to post. And so I've recently partnered with the company I work with right now, Hoxo Media, and working with them to coach recruiters around the globe at a desk level on how they can start to produce content, start to engage with people in the network, and ultimately drive inbound leads. And it's exciting. We see results pretty quickly. We see a lot of people that come in afraid to do videos. Like, the thought of doing a live show like this would petrify most people. And to see people get over that fear is really exciting. And so that's what I do now. I help people figure out different ways to do business development, and kind of modernize the recruitment approach would probably be the best way to put it.
So here's a question for you that just ran through my mind when you were talking about the first placement you ever made. And like they always say, you never forget your first. Do you remember how you found that candidate?
Yeah, I called into her office 14 times and left a bunch of voice notes, and then sent out like 3 in-mails, and I connected with her. And then obviously when you connect, you can send a direct message. And she's just like, "Are you the one that's been calling my office nonstop?" Yeah. And we chat. It was old school, man. There was no.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah, I was just in like I was actually at my parents' house, which I'm back at right now working because I've got a 2-year-old at home that screams all the time. But I'd moved back. I was, in that transition, didn't have my own place, was at my parents' house. So I remember just in this little room, and they were like, "Yeah, just find the right people." And that was the only instruction I got. Did a little bit of research on CAD and AutoCAD, what it was, figured out like, what do they actually do? What do these drafters do? And then it was just call, email. It was whatever it took to get the conversation, and made a couple people mad. But she was like, "Yeah, it sounds great. I'd love to explore an opportunity like this." And obviously, you guys both know the feeling like when you get a placement, and especially that first one. It was like it was. The only problem is then you're like chasing it all the time, but that's what drives you, right? It's to actually make an impact. And I was excited. The client was excited. She was excited. And And I think that's what makes recruiting unique is it's like outside of the people that get rejected for the role or don't get the job, for everyone else, it's just a win-win-win. And even those people who get rejected, if you keep the relationship going with them, you get to see, if you get to place them as well, then it's, again, another win-win-win-win for everybody. And I think that's part of the joy of what we do. It's just a thrill.
It's so true, because yesterday I put 2 people to work. Guess what, Joe? I still dance. I get up and I dance.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, like football. It's like, yeah, I did it. And you know what? It's that rush. If it's 1 person, 2 or 10, it's the same rush. I mean, you don't even think about placing them. You're just like, you made an impact in somebody's life, and it's like joy.
Yeah,
I can't describe it. I'll be honest with you. I'm sure you guys are the same way. You can't describe a placement when you place somebody, man.
Well, I just think about like if you sell like a software solution. I mean, that's got to be a thrill, right? If you sell like a $2 million software solution to like a big company, but like this is great. But it's like, okay, cool, you made the business operate better, save them some money or whatever. This is like, when you get those messages or you get the DMs where it's like 3 months in, they're like, hey, I'm able to afford this, or like, now my kid can do this, or now I'm free to do this. Like I've got more work-life balance. That's the stuff which that's what drives you on those days when you're getting yelled at for like, why are you calling me or whatever, why are you spamming me? When you get those messages, you go back to those victories and go, yeah, this is why we do it. So sorry for cutting you off there, Joe.
No, you're good. I was saying clearly we're all passionate about this. And, if you're selling software, hopefully you're passionate about selling software. Clearly we're passionate about recruiting. And again, we do it for much more than just the commissions. It's much more beyond that. It's relationship. You had a post, Joel, on LinkedIn, and you've got a great feed. And if the folks out there don't follow Joel, you should follow Joel, because you're always putting out these nuggets. And I love it because I resemble the fact that you like to keep things simple. And a lot of it is, hey, don't overthink it. Let's be common sense about it. You had a post, and you just mentioned, whether you place the person or not. You had a post that mentioned, hey, recruiters, even when when the person doesn't get the job, do you follow up with them? A lot of recruiters don't, and I never understood that. What's your philosophy on that?
I think, and this is the same issue that I struggle with again when it comes to selling what I do, which is building a brand, because it takes time, and I think it fundamentally comes from at an agency level, which is where a lot of us, there's the space that we operate in. It'd be the same in-house as well. We're just so trained in thinking about this week, like what are my send outs for this week? Who's interviewing this week? Obviously, then we think about what have we done this month, and then the quarter. But outside of that, like we're just really short-sighted. And it makes sense because a lot of times we're working under deadlines. If you're internal, you've got hiring managers barking at you like, hey, I've got to fill this 2 weeks ago. It's a lot of that pressure. But, just like creating content, you got to think macro, you got to think long-term. And so I think fundamentally, like in recruitment, it's such a busy moving job. There's always something going on. Like, I don't care if you are really scheduled and organized. At 10 a.m., you've got fires to put out. Like every day you've got a fire to put out that's unexpected. So you can have a plan, but things are going to come up. And I think because of that, we don't think about the impact that we're having on someone and how in 6 months they could be the next placement, or in 6 months they could be the next hiring manager that we work with. And I do think that the recruiters that do really, really well, they get this, but I still think it takes time to get this. And again, a lot of the big agencies, you bring in college grads and you just teach them, like, just do the numbers, do the calls, do the activity, build the numbers. And, it's not, but it doesn't happen a lot where we sit back and go, okay, like what are we thinking about a year from now, 2 years from now? So I think it's just fundamentally, and I think this is the same with sales as well, because sales is a relationship game. But if the quota is always about like the short term, and people don't have a vision for the long term, you just run into problems with follow-up, because you don't care about follow-up in 90 days if you're focused on this week all the time. Point. So yeah, it's like fundamental, I guess, just way that we think about things. And I think it's training. I think it's whoever the leadership is. I think great leadership will understand that you should follow up with people. But I just don't think that's the norm that's trained. I think it's just go where the money is the quickest and just repeat. Let's be profitable. But yeah, long term, I think you've got to have that mindset. And same with producing content,
Sure.
Yeah.
And if you want the long term relationship, which if you want to have a career in recruiting, you need to be focused on the long term relationships. Otherwise, you won't build the brand of being that recruiter that looks out for the people they work with.
Yeah, and John, we talked about this where it's like that first year in recruitment, probably that first couple of years.
Brutal.
It's brutal and it's up and down and it's this. But if you could just step back and go, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start to read relationships differently, and you're more focused on the relationship with the person and not the size of the account. And the more the depth of that relationship, that trust grows. Again, if you focus more on the relationships, and you said it, you're like, spend that time building the relationships that maybe aren't leading to business right away.
Right.
Over time, they will though, and they'll lead to referrals. And I just don't. I mean, you brought something up in the live show that we had the other day where I was like, man, maybe you should just have a time of just half an hour a day or an hour just to networking, just having calls with people for no reason other than just to get to know them, find out about their business. But I just wonder how much of people really focus about that in our industry. So yeah.
No, you're so true on that, Joe. And I got to jump in here because I see staffing firms and recruiting firms right now are like jumping around panic. Oh, I can't find candidates. You know why? Just what you said. They're chasing the 1 year plan, 1 year with recruiters, burning or turning them and getting new people. Like you said, relationship building is going to get an ROI. You're going to have return on your investment, man, with relationships, man. So
Always.
It's funny you say that, Richard, because you're absolutely right. If you have, I think a lot of those folks that are struggling with finding talent never really learned how to recruit talent. They were very reactive. So it's the post and pray. It's, let me post an ad and people will respond to my ad, which in my book is not recruiting. It's just a way of, some candidate inflow. I believe that the folks that have always spent the time networking and building those relationships, they're still struggling for talent like everybody else, but they've got a network to pull from. So they're the ones that are surviving through this battle, if you will, a lot better than those that never really learned how to invest in their network.
True. So true. So Joel, you ready for some LinkedIn questions? I did a poll here and I got some of our viewers and they're ready to jump on some of this stuff. The first one that I have to ask you is, when you post something, how many times should you post? What should you post about? And should you have somebody else post your stuff?
Great questions. How many times should you post a day? Oh, sorry. How many times should you post? I shouldn't say a day. I think it actually really depends on the size of your audience. And I think it depends on your own schedule as well. I would say if you want to build something strong, consistency is the key. So what I mean by that is no use in just going and posting every day for a week and then stopping. Like I think if for you 1 time a week is too much, then get good at posting 1 time a week and get consistent with that and build up. What I advise people to do is, you should never post more than you should always have at least 4 hours in between each post if you're going to post multiple times a day. And if you're going to post multiple times a day, make sure you're posting different types of content. So LinkedIn gives us a lot of different ways that you can show up compared to other platforms. Like if you think about TikTok, for example, it's just all video. That's the only way you can show up is video. Instagram, you've got the stories, and then you've got the images, and then you've got videos, right? So it's LinkedIn, it's like you can do a text post, you could do an article, you could do a live show, you could do a video, you could do a shorter video, you could do an image, it's a lot of different ways to show up. So if you're going to show up multiple times a day, vary up the type of content. So maybe post an image, maybe do a video, then do a text post. But I'd say general rule, leave 4 to 5 hours between each post. Now, for most people, that's going to be way too much. I'd say at bare minimum 3 times a week, to really see an impact, 3 times a week. And then what I advise is post 3 times a week, do it for about 12 weeks. And what you're going to find is you're going to have 36 pieces of content. And after 10 weeks, you can actually go back to some of that content and you can start to recycle or repurpose it. So you can make some edits, but let's say if you've got a pain point that your client is facing or a candidate is facing and you post about it, chances are in 2-3 months it's still going to have that same pain point. So it's a piece of valuable content that you can reuse. So the idea is, like, at the beginning, you're starting to build up what we call a content library. And then once you've built up enough pieces of content, then you don't have to produce as much new content. You can just start to repurpose. You could start, maybe you have a text post that's a good idea. You can make a video on it, or you can share an image that relates to it. And then as far as having other people do content for you, look, I did content for other people, and I did ghostwriting for people. But I'd always encourage them to do their own post as well. And the funny thing that happened is every time they did their own post, it did better than the post I wrote for them, because people connect with, like, who you are. And the best example of this is, like, we have non-competes in our industry. And that's because it doesn't matter if you work for, okay, it does matter, I guess, with some of the bigger brands like Randstad or Robert Half. But even then, they still have non-competes because people aren't working with Randstad. They're not working with Robert Half. They're working with the recruiter. Like, it's such a relationship business. Absolutely. And so have that same idea with content. Like, you're reaching out to people, and you're putting yourself out there to people you've worked with in the past, who are in your network, people you've placed in the past, candidates you've had conversations with. They want to see you as a person. So if you get someone else to do it for you, it's a slippery slope, and it usually costs a lot of money. And unless they really know you super well and they know how you speak, they know how you do stuff, just figure out how to write and do it yourself, and you're going to save yourself a lot of money, and it's going to be more effective.
Makes total sense, because it's all about authenticity. And if you're having someone else do something for you, you're not really being vulnerable. You're not showing your authentic self. And I'd like to think that in today's world, more than ever before, people want to see that authenticity, and they want to see that you're a real person. What do you think is the biggest recruiter fail when it comes to how recruiters use LinkedIn?
I mean, I think it's just sharing jobs nonstop. I think, and I think the sharing jobs and just job openings, and that's all you're sharing, I think that's the biggest mistake that we see. And the reason it's a mistake is because if you're connected to 10,000 people, all of those 10,000 people are not looking for a job all the time. And so if that's all you're doing is showing up that way, people just check out really, really quickly. So I think that's one massive mistake that I see people making. And then just simple things like, you're not thinking about your profile. You're not thinking about things like your headline. You're not engaging with other people as well. Like, simple example of this is, if you have a prospect list of 20 clients, are all 20 of those clients going to be active on LinkedIn? Probably not, but a percentage of them will, because they're trying to promote their own brands. People will make 100 phone calls to leave 2 voicemails, but they won't spend 5 minutes to leave 2 comments. And the difference
that's a great point you just drove home. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, and I think the comments are, like, it's so underutilized. And when you think about comments, like, if I comment on someone's post, they're not going to get mad. They're like, oh, well, this guy's supporting me. What a cool guy. Like, like, thank you for supporting me. You leave someone 7 voicemails, they're going to be like, can you stop leaving me voicemails? and so you got done a voicemail. You never know if they're going to respond. If you start commenting on your prospects' posts, and what I don't mean is, you don't just show up there and go, hey, cool, or like, love that. But actually, like, if the CEO of the company you want to work with just did a podcast episode, watch 10, 15 minutes of the podcast, comment on it. Hey, I love that point you made. That makes an impact, because it's like, they probably can't even get their own employees to comment on this stuff. So if you show up, hey, wait, who's this Joel guy? Why does he watch the podcast? And then they check your profile out. check
Which is why your profile has to be strong, because they're going to check you out.
Exactly. And then after they checked you out, do you hit them up right away? No, you wait a couple days. Hey man, checked out the profile, checked out that podcast. It was super cool. I love what you said about this. Love to have a chat with you about that sometime. And like, oh, yeah, I love to talk about that because that's why I did the podcast. Oh wow, you got a conversation. So it's starting to think about like social media more of like a social like network than a networking event. Like how would you approach that? So yeah, those. But again, the job posting one, it's I don't see that a lot on my newsfeed. But when I work with my clients and I work with the people who are on our program, and I go share your screen, let me see your newsfeed. That a lot of them are connected with recruiters, and that's all they're sharing. It's like open jobs.
Now
open
hiring.
jobs. I'm like, you do realize that like you tell your companies that you're working with that like posting and praying doesn't work, but you're posting and praying. Like I don't get it.
Well, it's funny because obviously I work with and therefore am connected with a lot of recruiters, so I get their feeds, and I tell them just like you tell them, look, don't do this. If you can do that. But also you got to be doing other things. To your point, you got to. It's all about engagement. So yeah, I'm going to post every once in a while things that I'm working on in case my network knows anybody. But I'm just going to not post my 5 top jobs every day. It that gets so stale, and you see it come through, and you're like, please stop doing this, because eventually people don't want to be in your network anymore because it's just taking up valuable space in their news feed, and they want to see it's all about recruitment. It's all about engagement, right? All we ever want to do as recruiters is have conversations with people. They've got to look at social in the same respect. The conversation just happens to be digital. You want to engage in that. You want, to your point, comment, provide some thought content, give back to your community. Don't just ask for something from them all the time. It makes a huge difference.
Exactly. Really, and I could ask you, Joel, real quick, that say somebody likes all your stuff, you got to go back and like their stuff too, correct? It's just not a one-way street.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think at the bare minimum, if someone comments on your post, then like respond to it. Like I see people where they're like,
totally,
I want more engagement, and then they get 2 comments and they don't respond to it. I'm like, well, why do you respond back? But yeah, to your point, that's building a relationship, and look, this stuff takes time to do as well. But I think fundamentally, again, it's like a mind shift. It's the social media thing isn't just like a waste of time, like fun thing to do. It is actual business development. But I mean, business development to me is relationship development. It's like you said, John, it's starting conversations. And like, if I ask recruiters, well, what would qualify a good day for you in terms of conversations? Most of them will say 7 to 10 good conversations, and I'm doing a great job. And I'm like, yeah, 7 to 10, that's great. But then imagine if you supplement that with 7 to 10 like digital conversations as well, which then turn into actual conversations off the phone. So I think you've got to view it as business development, building relationships. And I'm going to be really straight up, like in the next 10 years, when it comes to Gen Z coming into the workforce, they're not answering your phone calls. Like, I don't care what people say. Like, they're just not how they're interacting. And so, but like, I will answer the phone sometimes. So you can you still use the phone. And I don't say don't ever use the phone, but it's a smart person uses all different types of ways to connect with different people, because you just don't know. Like, I don't know how different people connect. Like, my grandma's on Facebook, so I'm sure if you DM'd her, she'd DM you back. Maybe she doesn't answer her phone. I don't know. And I think I post about that a lot too, where it's like, I think the one mistake that a lot of like the online people say, if I'm honest, like a lot of other people that are creating content, is they get really fixated with inbound, and then they talk like that's the only way to like build a business. And I'm like, guys, I do outbound because I want to scale our business. I don't want to just sit back and wait for people to come to me. Now, people do come to me, which is nice. It's a nice addition, but I still do outbound because sales is an outbound activity. So I think the danger right now with a lot of online, quote unquote gurus and influencers is they act like, hey, my inbox is flooded with leads. I'm like, cool. If you want to have like a one-man band, like that can work. But if you want to scale a business, you're always going to have that outbound. And you know what? When you get inbound leads, you still got to sell them. So the selling part doesn't change. You still got to be able to sell people. Nobody shows up in your inbox and goes, here's $2,000. I'll work with you. Got to sell them on the value still. So I think that I think has kind of tainted people's thoughts with this stuff, where they're like, oh, this guy, all he talks about is content and he must be all about that. No, I'm about omni-channel, trying everything.
Yep.
If I don't have my sales for the day and my meetings for the day, you know what I'm doing? I'm picking up the phone. I'm doing some outbound.
It's a mix-up of everything. Joe, I got to ask you. Okay, this is something that the viewers were asking about, tagging. I get tagged on so many different things. I don't even know anybody. I just tag everybody. What is it, like 40
you're famous, Richard?
So what do you think about tagging people you don't even know? Just
I number one, I would tell everybody, like, just I've actually turned off my notifications. So I don't even receive the notifications when I get tagged because it's so annoying. I think tagging, again, if you use it strategically, just like posting your jobs, it can work really, really well if you know how to do it. And you know, I would look to tag, like, again, if you've got, let's say you just got a placement with a client, you know, and it was a great placement, you know, tag that person, shout out about them. Maybe, you know, maybe you don't want to focus on this month. Maybe you want to wait until the rebate period's over, or that money back guarantee is over. But post, you know, tag those people, tag those clients that you're working with, a lot more effective. Or if one of your clients is, let's say, you know, you're trying to get into, or you're working with a company and they've got a great charity event going on, tag them and be like, hey, look what they're doing. That's an excellent use of tagging. So if you can tag to promote other people, great use of it. The wrong usage of it is just to tag someone because you think it's going to help you. The wrong approach.
To get a like or something.
Exactly. You know, and you see it on LinkedIn a lot. You get these wall tags that people do.
Oh gosh, yes. Holy cow.
And funnily enough, when I first started doing LinkedIn, I would tag 5 people because that's what everyone was doing at the time. It was just like their first comment was always like a tag of 5 people, and I was like, oh, I'll do the same thing. And it wasn't actually until I stopped tagging people that my views went up, because what people don't always realize is if people that you tag don't respond to it, the post actually loses engagement. So you're probably better off not tagging unless it's highly relevant to that person. And again, you want to be sensitive of that because nobody, like you said, Richard, wants to be tagged 18 times in a day. Oh. It's just annoying. Should see the stuff I get tagged in. It'll be like Shay Robottom and this guy, and then Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk, and then Joel in the middle. And I'm just like, this is so, I don't even know these people. Like, why are you doing this?
Like, delete.
Yeah, it'll be like me and like 5 other people. I'm like, thanks for thinking. You really thought about me on this one, didn't you?
Leveraging off of the tag topic, what are your thoughts? How does LinkedIn respond versus, like, I know that it's big on Twitter, but how does LinkedIn respond to hashtags?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about hashtags is to just look at your own newsfeed and look at what shows up. So on other platforms, hashtags matter a lot more because they have discover sections, and Twitter's like that as well, where like if you're following hashtags, it will show you content regularly. Like I follow startup hashtags, so I see a lot of content around startups. If you go on Instagram, you have like the little magnifying glass and it's a discover section. And what the discover section shows you is content that, because you've liked content with these same hashtags, you're more likely to like. So that's what an algorithm is. An algorithm is essentially putting the content that you want based on your activity. Now, if you go to LinkedIn, if the first post is always somebody you know, second post is always a promoted post. So that's the one that someone's paid. It's an ad essentially. And then if you go down your feed, there's 3 reasons that something will show up. It'll either be because somebody in your network liked it, or it'll be because you're connected to that person directly. And then the third reason is because you're following a hashtag, but you've got to go down really far to actually find those posts. So hashtags, they still work and they still are relevant. What I would advise is you want to make sure that you are using no more from 3 to 5. Actually, that's what LinkedIn advises. And you want to make sure it's a relevant hashtag to whatever you're posting about. Because if it isn't and someone's following it and then your post has really nothing to do with that,
Gotcha.
they're going to scroll by.
Perfect.
If it's a hashtag, let's say, and someone's following recruitment and it's a post that's really about recruitment, and then that person clicks on it, then the algorithm's going to read that and go, wow, based on people's activity on this post, and we showed it because of this hashtag, this is a relevant post for that hashtag, so they're more likely to promote it again. Whereas if you, let's say, if you put in a post about recruitment and then you just said like motivation, and it starts showing it to people that follow motivation, but it's not really a motivational post, then they're not going to interact with it, and then the algorithm's going to read it as, this isn't really relevant to the hashtag, and so it will actually hurt you. Does that make sense?
So like a job posting,
makes a lot of sense.
Motivational job posting, now hiring, it says motivation on it.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like you got to make sure it's relevant, and then again, like you don't want to confuse it. And I see it on a lot of times on the platforms too, where people will put like trending hashtags and things like that aren't actually relevant to the post. But what's happening is like the algorithm is just going to show that to a select group of people, and depending on how they interact with it, will tell the algorithm whether or not it's quality content. So again, that's how the algorithm works on LinkedIn as well. I mean, the algorithms essentially test content, and then based on how many people interact with it, that will tell it whether or not it's a good post or not. So I mean, and I think LinkedIn said 3 to 5 hashtags is relevant. If I'm honest with you, I never used to use hashtags. I've only started using them within the last 6 months.
Me too.
And they have really started to make an effort. And I think, I mean, I could see LinkedIn at some point, because I talked to some of their team as well with this stuff. And one of the things I suggested was like the newsfeed can get really stale because it's so based on like people, and we need to have more of a newsfeed that's just based on topics. So I can find people that I'm not connected to that are talking and putting really good content out about recruitment or about, could be remote work or just things that are relevant. If they gave more of like that discovery feed, I think it would increase the amount that people spend on the newsfeed. Because right now it's like some people's news feeds are just trash, and so they don't spend that much time on the platform.
Great points.
True. I got another question, Joe. We're just going through them all, man, because
I love it.
We're excited about this. Groups, joining groups and being active in groups. Is it effective on LinkedIn?
I would say no. I'd say like Facebook groups is way better, but it all comes down to the notifications, and the notifications in groups are really, really poor right now. But I think LinkedIn, they realize that they've got a massive issue with groups, and so they keep on saying they're going to make improvements. And I've actually recently seen that they are making improvements with it. Like, for example, I saw someone recently said that they're going to be adding in like top contributor in the groups, so you'll get like a badge, and they're beta testing stuff like that. So I think it's on their radar, because when LinkedIn first started, a lot of people spent a lot of time building up those groups, and so there's groups out there with like thousands of people. And the owners have essentially abandoned it because the notifications on it were really bad. So my take on groups is right now, Facebook is just better because you just get better notifications. So I think if you're going to start somewhere, I'd actually start on Facebook, building the group. But I think if you've got a group, and like we have a LinkedIn group at our company, we've got about 1,500 recruiters in it that are for people that have gone through our training. And so we're still growing it because it's a good way for us to post notifications. But if you were starting from scratch, I would say probably try and build a group on Facebook right now, and then just stay tuned. And if you notice changes in groups, that could be a good trigger to maybe put some more effort into that.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. One more question I have on my end is, everybody keeps asking, should I pay for LinkedIn Recruiter? I mean, it keeps going pricier. Is it worth it? What's the value?
Man, to me, I just discovered HireTool, and I don't want to like not promote LinkedIn Recruiter or like get in trouble.
Good people, they run my show. I love them,
dude. HireTool, I think, is better value. But here's the thing: I promise you this: your problem right now is not a lack of data, because you could find that data. Like I used to. I used to have I used to do searches for company emails, and I'd have like these like little hacks that I would use with like I'd link it and just find PDFs, and most of the data is out there because these tools are just data scraping it. The only thing that LinkedIn Recruiter really gave people access to was the in-mails, right? So you could message people that you're not connected to. I think it's a waste. I think you're much more better to focus on using LinkedIn as a brand builder, and then using other tools like ZoomInfo, HireTool, any of those tools, emailing people directly. But in terms of like, are in-mails that effective anymore? I'd argue that they're really not. I think you got a lot better chance of connecting with someone, finding if they're active, and then once they connect with you, send them a voice note. I'd ask how many of you guys are sending voice notes through the app? Like, you can literally send a voice note. Way more effective. Send a candidate a quick video.
Yes.
I don't think an email really. I think 5 years ago they were pretty effective, but I think they've just lost their effectiveness, and that's technically really what you're paying for with LinkedIn Recruiter. I guess too, you're paying for like, you could see everybody, right? And you can search and you could do Boolean searches, but I've played around with HireTool a little bit and does the same thing, and I actually like it more.
I think if you don't have an ATS, LinkedIn Recruiter can add value because you can also, it treats it more like an ATS where you can keep a history of things and you store. But if you're working with a company or on your own, you've got your own ATS. I agree with you. I've always told people, I've never paid for a subscription in LinkedIn. I've always had the free version. And I've always, as a recruiter, I've been able to find whatever I needed to find and connect with whoever I needed to connect with. You can get a lot out of the tool without going to those levels.
Yeah, and I use Sales Navigator, and I will say, Sales Navigator I actually prefer it to LinkedIn Recruiter, because on Sales Navigator you actually can create your own news feed. So I have a news feed on my like regular news feed, which is like connections and these other LinkedIn creators that are putting out content. The Sales Navigator actually aggregates a news feed which shows like people who are in my saved searches when they're posting, and so I just go into there for like 20 minutes and I just comment on their stuff. It actually makes it super easy to be able to do that. So at Sales Navigator, you could still do Boolean search, you can still create lists, pretty powerful. And so I think if I had the resources and I was, I was actually building an agency, I'd probably do LinkedIn Sales Navigator and HireTool. Those would be the two ways, or LinkedIn Sales Navigator and ZoomInfo. I'd want one tool for just emails. I'd want the other tool to actually just engage with those prospects. And Sales Navigator, I think you get like 10 free in-mails, and it's $79 a month. It's a steal.
That's awesome.
Good stuff. Johnny, any final thoughts? Man, I know you got some good thoughts here, man.
I was taking notes. I always take notes during our sessions. I love learning. I always learn something. And this has been just chock full of info. So first off, Joel, thanks a lot for joining us and for sharing your knowledge. Going back to early in the show today, the thing that stuck out with me and the thing that I really loved hearing you say was, it comes down to the fact that consistency is key. And like anything, if you want to build your brand on LinkedIn and you want to build connections and engage with people on LinkedIn, it can't be a one-time thing. You're not going to get immediate gratification. It takes time to build. Now, once it builds, you can almost get that compound effect over time, but you got to be consistent about it and commit to it. Otherwise, don't do it at all. So that's my takeaway today.
All I would say with that too, though, is you can get, and this is more for like the big billers and people who have been in the industry for a long time. I think you'd be surprised at how quickly you get the results from. I don't think you get new prospects right away reaching out. That takes time. But think about how many people you've talked to that that you make good connections with. Think about how many hiring managers that you're not working with right now that maybe you worked with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Think about all those candidates that you placed. Sometimes I ask this question: how many candidates have you placed? And some of these numbers are ridiculous. People out there place 500, 1,000 people. You made a connection with all of those people, but how are you nurturing them? You haven't talked to them in 3 years. You're going to call them? No, but you're connected to them on LinkedIn. So if you start posting interesting stuff, or they see you, you give them an update on your life. What we actually see is a lot of people get job orders and conversations with people who are just like, yeah, I saw your post and now you're top of mind again. Actually, I remember I had a great service. So I think you can actually get those results pretty quick. But to your point, it's the consistency over time for new business. That does take time. So I just always like to throw that in there because I think
great differentiator.
People don't always think about that.
Awesome stuff. Joe, she wants to know your LinkedIn. So tell us where everybody can reach you at, my man.
So if you just search for me, Joel Lalji, if you just Google my name, all my stuff comes up because I'm the only Joel Lalji there is, which is cool.
In the whole world, right? You are the only one.
I'm the only one.
We're not going to find any bad stuff if we Google you, are we?
You see my MySpace because I can't delete it, and
hey,
it's like
on a side note, what was your theme song for MySpace? You know, do you have it still or what?
I don't even know, man, but I know the URL is like Big Pimp for Life. Talk about employer branding gone wrong.
Love it.
I was like 18, 19. I'm smoking a cigarette on there. There's a couple pictures of me in the club. I've tried to take it down. There's nothing I could do about it. I probably lost clients over it, but if you just search Joe Lalji, and then if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I get a decent amount of connection requests. So just say, saw you on the live show, and we'll get you added in there. But at least let me know that. Otherwise, I turn down a lot of people now just because I'm getting nearer the max of connections, and I want to keep that. But you're always welcome to follow as well. And if you've got questions, just connect with me and send me that little message, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, hey, once again, thank you, brother Joel, man. I love you, man. You're a good dude, man. You really, open the eyes for LinkedIn today, man, for a lot of people. You know what I mean? So I'm sure they're going to have more questions. We'll definitely have on a future show, but keep rocking out what you do, man, because you know what? One thing I'm going to end this with, you're genuine, man. You're real. And that's what it's all about, man. Being real, man.
Exactly. Love it.
Keep it like that, brother.
Hey, you too.
Well, once again, thanks a lot. We'll see you guys next week for our 25th show. So look out. We might have a little surprise. Look out. What's going to happen?
Let's go.
We'll see you next week. Same place, same time. You know it.
See you guys.
Take care.